Welcome back to Intentional Trips. I am Lindy Eman. I don't like doing introductions, and today we are in the integration, as promised, talking about food. And food is something that I will come back to a lot over the course of this entire thing because it was one of the deepest, darkest layers of, my particular coding, I guess, my baggage, my trauma, my healing, my whatever. Um and of course, if you are on any kind of journey of healing, self-discovery, spiritual growth, whatever you want to call it, um all of the above, you understand that everything has layers, right? It's like you think you've figured something out, and then surprise, that was one of the layers, and then there's more and more and more and more and more. It's like, healing is like ogres are like onions. The layers never end. Yeah. And so for me personally, food, my relationship with food, my relationship with my body, and how food impacted that, all of that, like it, I mean, honestly, to the point where even in the last year, as I was like, okay, cool, like I think we're kind of on the other side of what a lot of all of that darkness and healing and all of that was, like the food and body stuff was so deep in there that there was a point where I was just like, this just might never be gone. Like, I just might never be gone. And of course, like, I'm not sitting here trying to be like, I've healed all of my wounds and everything is perfect now. Like, that is not the case, right? And there is a palpable other side that I have gotten to in so many of these things, including my journey with food in my body, in a way that for a really long time I was like, I think I'm going to kind of be on like this side of it forever. Like, I don't know if I can get to whatever that invisible, the other side that I had felt myself get to with so many other aspects of my life. I was like, you just might not get there. We've made a lot of progress with the food stuff, but I don't know if we'll ever get to the other side. And then for a while I was spiraling because, like, you know how they say that like the wound is the medicine. Um, or if you haven't heard that, that is whoever they are, they say that. Um, and that it's like whatever your like largest, battle and struggle was, like that's the way that you can help heal other people. And I went through this little thing like a year ago where I was like, do I have to be like a food coach? Like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not what I want to do. But fudge, this is like yeah. Oh, it's cute how we'll just, go to all of these different places in ourselves. Anyway, food's a tricky one. And it's mm, we have really messed things up in the West in particular, right? Where we have actually completely separated ourselves from the idea of like true nourishment, of being connected to our bodies, of nourishing our bodies. I mean, this triad, right? Body, mind, and spirit. Like, for a really long time, even as somebody who was like deeply walking a path of self-discovery and spirituality and like coming home to all of those things, like I still kind of, for a long time, was just like, yes, like body is where my mind and spirit kind of just happen to live. And like, sure, it should be healthy because that's where my mind and spirit live. And so if my body is healthy, then I can keep living with my spirit and my mind. And like it just couldn't sink into me how equal and expansive all three of those things are, right? That my body is, yes, of course, the beautiful home in which I live, and is, I mean, also the way that I experience life as a human being. Like, that's the central tenet to it, right? Without the body, I'm not human. Without the human vessel, I'm not a human. I'm just the spirit and maybe the mind, if the mind, yeah. Um, but that my body is my first source of intuition, of guidance, of being in tune with myself and with others. And it's interesting because for so long, I did know that my body was speaking to me. I didn't have words for it, right? But it's like we all, it's like that gut feeling. and you're already getting chills when somebody's talking about something that really resonates with you. Um, there are cues that are very loud that many humans, even in the West, who have completely numbed themselves out through what we consume, both in a dietary sense and also in a media sense and in an everything sense, right? And I shouldn't put the onus on people. It is simultaneously, yes, we have a choice in this. So yes, we do numb ourselves out, kind of, and the society into which we have been born is one that makes it very hard to not do that, right? I don't want to blame people for the fact that it's like, yeah, I mean, we literally aren't raised to know better. That's shifting now. Um, but anyway, yeah. So these cues that my body was always giving me about leading me where I was meant to be, or telling me what felt good or what felt bad. I mean, I go back to when I was 3 years old, right? And we'll get deeper into this soon in the trip portion of this. I on April 10th, 2021, I sat my first ayahuasca ceremony. And just for an anchor, I guess, in the timeline, I got to Costa Rica at the very end of March 2021. So yeah, within less than 2 weeks of getting to Costa Rica, and in that story that I'm telling, my first ayahuasca ceremony, and then subsequently my second ayahuasca ceremony. And in that second ceremony, I went back. A lot happened. One of the things that happened, my intention for that second ceremony, was to go deeper. The first one had been to reconnect with my inner child, which I did, and the second one was to go deeper. And these kind of went hand in hand, right? And in that second ceremony, I ended up going back, not even back. I was able to visit the present version of me at the time, 5 years ago. Um, I went back and spoke to every version of me, basically from birth until I was about 15. Every year I met her and was able to hear her and see her and be with her and understand her pain, understand what she wasn't able to say, understand what she was going through. And 3-year-old me, where a lot of, some of the stuff that I had to work through then in adulthood really started. One of the things that 3-year-old me was really wounded by was the fact that I started rejecting meat when I was 3 years old. And I believe everybody is the agent of their own body. You know what is good for you to consume. When you really sit in it and are true with yourself, you know what you are meant to nourish yourself with. It takes time, right? But I'm not going to ever sit here and say everybody should follow this exact diet or, this exact thing, because I don't know you and your body. What I know for me, and what I'm also going to speak to here, again, from me and my experience, is that when I was 3 years old, I don't remember this. My dad tells the story. Apparently there was a day that we were eating some kind of beef for dinner, and I looked at my dad and I said, "Dad, did this meat come from a cow?" And he said, "Yes, sweetie, it did." And I said, "Did they have to kill the cow to get it?" And he said, "Well, yes, sweetie, they did." And I go, "I don't want it." And I just pushed the plate away. And he was like, "Okay, you are 3, you are a child." And also, no shade to my parents. They 1,000,000% were doing their best with the information, and it is completely understandable that when a 3-year-old rejects food, your immediate thought is not like, is this a deep spiritual knowing of my deeply expansive toddler that, whose like soul is massiver than anybody can ever conceive? Like, that's not what my dad was thinking, right? He was literally just like, my toddler has rejected dinner. That's the framework he's working in. And doesn't mean that it doesn't impact me the way that it did, right? But it's just like, all of these things can be true. And so he basically said, "Well, sweetheart, you're 3. When you turn 18, you will be an adult in the eyes of the law, and you can make your own decisions about what you eat. But from until then, mom and I make your food. Well, mom makes your food, and you eat dinner with us and what we tell you to eat." And for 3-year-old me, that was okay. But it did start this on and off battle where I would push back every so often on just being like, anytime there was meat, I was like, I don't want it. And they were like, "Okay, this is what's for dinner." And I was like, okay. what I realized in that ayahuasca ceremony, right, to go back to that, again, we'll get deeper into it when we get there, but that wasn't, of course, there were moments when I was a toddler where I was just rejecting stuff because that's what kids do, or being like, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to take a nap, of course. In that moment, some deep part of my body, my soul, something in me was telling me I'm not supposed to consume the flesh of other living creatures. Period. I knew that as a 3-year-old. And that was coming. The fact that it also kept coming up, right? It was like my body knew. I didn't have words for it because I was a toddler and it's hard to articulate. I also had speech impediments, which made it hard to articulate and get my point across. Didn't have the vocabulary and also couldn't say my letters R or L. When your name is Lindy and you can't say the letter L, very difficult, darling, very difficult. That also feeds into the inability to be heard and communicate and get my, throat chakra open. Again, we'll get there. um, yeah, but my little baby body knew that I wasn't supposed to be consuming these things. But that's what we do in the West, right? We like to not listen to those things. We're conditioned that the brain, the mind, is the only thing that's supposed to come into play. So most of us are like, okay, well, my body says I don't want to eat that, or I don't want to do that. But my brain says this is just what people do, or this is what kids do, or this is whatever. So you go against the screaming alarm bells in your body that are saying, please don't do the thing or eat the thing. But you're like, no, but like, this is just what we do. And so we condition ourselves over time to just ignore the signals of our body. And people do this when they push themselves too hard to work. I realize that I'm getting more into body consciousness than into food right now, which is interesting. I'm going to keep going on body consciousness, but I'll bring it back to food. That's what we're going to do. We push past those things, right, that are telling us the alarm bells, right? And then we end up getting sick. Like everybody has experienced this, right? Where you're just like, you're going at full speed. Maybe you've got a bunch of projects at work and, your kids have stuff going on. And there's literally just every hour of the day is jam-packed for weeks on end. And you don't even have a second to think. And you're just kind of like, okay, well, here we go through all of it. And then the day that you don't have anything planned, finally the day that you're like, okay, I can rest, I can whatever, you get sick. It's like your body literally is just waiting for the moment where it's actually safe to kind of collapse. And then it does. But the whole time there have been signals from your body being like, slow down, rest, darling. But your brain is like, we can't because we have to get little Susie to ballet practice and like this thing. And it's really hard because we live in a society that does not allow for a lot of rest. And a lot of people were getting so much better. But just saying like, hey, my body is telling me that I need to sleep right now, instead of like going to your big important business meeting, like that's not really an option for most people, right? Even though that's the natural way of being human. Bringing back to food. Again, so many layers for me for food. One, starting from when I knew what I was meant to be putting in my body and I was told I was wrong, more or less, right, as a 3-year-old, and then was made to eat food that I didn't want to eat, that I knew wasn't meant for me, up until the point I was 6. And then we made a deal, me and my parents, that I could forego all other meat, but I would eat chicken. My 6-year-old logic was that there was enough chickens in the world and I could morally stand for that. And then when I was 8, there was a night, I'll probably tell the story again at some point, but there was a night that we were out east in Bar Harbor, I think. And my parents did that thing at a seafood restaurant, when you like pick your lobsters while they're still alive in the tank, which is actually a truly, like, even adult me is like, yeah, this is a really messed up thing that we do actually as a society. But anyway, 8-year-old me really was not about this. So I watched my parents pick their live creatures. And then when the creatures were then set on the table, no longer living, I threw a tantrum and basically like ran out of the restaurant screaming and crying. And then my parents sent my sister after me. They ate their lobsters. At least they didn't die in vain. And after that, my parents were like, okay, obviously this matters to you and you don't have to eat meat if you don't want to. And I never have again. And I've been fully plant based for almost 10 years now. And again, that's me. That is what I know is meant for me and my body. I don't know what is good for anybody else's body. My cells don't want creature in me, right? Um yeah, and so, but that conditioning of being told, okay, you don't know what you're meant to consume this other thing. And then being told like that things are food that are objectively not food, right? And this is huge, not even in the West anymore. This is global at this point, but it's like super processed anything. Yes, at some point it was made out of materials that generally are regarded as food. By the time, like, an Oreo cookie, I've loved an Oreo in my life. Like, I have absolutely loved an Oreo. Um, by the time an Oreo cookie makes its way to your mouth, none of the things that originally resembled food, of which are probably only a small fraction, like I know there's wheat in there, they're actually vegan, so there's no cream. There's cacao or cocoa, I'm sure, somewhere, maybe. Obviously, some kind of sugar, but like the distance between the plant that was that wheat or that sugar cane or that cocoa leaf or plant, the time and distance and amount of machinery involved between when that thing was in the earth and when it's going into your mouth, plus all of the other chemicals and all of the other things, like, it is not food anymore. It tastes good, it is technically edible, it will not kill you, right? Like, all of those things are true, but it is actually preposterous that we grew up in a world where they were like, apple, food, Oreo, food, and you don't know any different because you're a child, right? Or you're an adult, and that's what the grocery stores tell. Like, it makes so much sense that people don't or didn't really think about this stuff. But then as you start kind of putting dots and things together and realizing, like, okay, maybe not all things that are sold at the grocery store can, like, create it equal. Maybe not all things that I put into my body impact me the same way. I mean, in calories, like, also, full disclosure, I am not a scientist. I am not a dietitian. I have no formal training in any of this. This is, again, just me, my experience, my things that I have come to find are true for me. Take what resonates, leave everything else. If you're like, that kind of makes sense, cool. If you're like, I think that's whack, great, cool. That said, like, there was a period where, you know, I think we've moved past this for the most part, but it was like calories were like the big thing, right? And it was like all about calories. How many calories do you consume? And that's all that anybody cared about. And it's also, but it's like, okay, if you eat 2,000 calories of just spinach for a month, every day, 2,000 calories of spinach versus 2,000 calories of Oreos, for example, like, the impact on your body and your mind and your spirit, because all of these things are connected, are not going to be the same. And I really started diving more deeply. Like, well, I've had friends reflect this back to me because I had such a distorted view of food and my body for so long. It's hard for me to see the things that were kind of healthy about me in this experience, because, like, I mean, I had big old eating disorders throughout middle, high school, college, into my mid 20s. And then I had, like, a warped relationship with food. I don't think we would go as far as to call it an eating disorder, but like very disordered eating throughout my 20s into my 30s, right? Like, God, even a few years ago, like, if I ordered something at a restaurant, depending on the mood I was in, right? It wasn't all the time, but if I was a little bit, like, not in a very balanced place, if I ordered something in a restaurant and they brought it, and if I had said, like, with, like, no olives, please, or whatever, and they set it down and there was olives in it, the reaction in me, I wouldn't do this, but it was like I wanted to literally, like, break down sobbing. And it felt like I was being, like, personally like harmed. And I knew that that wasn't the case, right? I wasn't like, this waiter did this on purpose to hurt me. But the little kid in me, the 3-year-old that was forced to eat food she didn't want to eat, it was like I did my best, like it. And it also goes back to being able to use my voice, where part of it was just like I did this. It was like I tried to tell you that I didn't want olives, and then you didn't listen, and now there's and it's food, and food's so hard, and like um yeah, the layers go deep. And so while this has been something that I have thought about, I started kind of doing deeper dives, I guess, into like how to more properly nourish myself in like 2013. That's when I started watching a lot of documentaries and started really realizing that I was like, oh, no, all of these things are not the same, right? Like, I was living in London at the time, actually, and I realized when I went to the store there, if I bought a can of chickpeas in London, it was literally chickpeas, water, and maybe salt. Sometimes salt, sometimes no salt. That was it. Because canning is a preservation technique. You don't need preservatives when you're canning something. The act of canning is that, right? And then it's like I'd be back in the States for Christmas or whatever. I go to the store and a can of chickpeas, water, salt, at least one preservative, maybe two, probably a firming agent, and maybe some color just to make them look extra chickpea-ier. And I was like, what on earth are we doing? Like, why? Why? And in 2013, and again, this is something that like is just an interesting thing when you're on a different kind of journey than other people. Because in 2013, very few people in the United States wanted to have the conversation around there's poison in our foods without being too hyperbolic, right? Or they were willing to be like, oh yeah, we should all get rid of high fructose corn syrup. And that was as far as anyone would go. There was a brief period where people were really anti-GMO, but it was just like in 2013, if you were like, hey, but maybe what you put in your body really matters. And like, if you're like feeling bad mentally and physically, like maybe changing what you consume would maybe change that. Like, people didn't want to hear that. And again, that's something, and it's saying that it also, a big part of my own journey and my own coming into being, right, has been learning and walking the line of just kind of being like, again, I know what is good for me and what is true for me. It is not my job, responsibility, or uh, like my right to try to push that or put that on anyone else, right? Which when I was younger, that line was a lot blurrier. And I do apologize sincerely to any and all of the human beings that I have been like overly forceful with, well, I just learned this thing, and so you should do this thing about you, because that is part of, a way that I used to operate. But I think it is on some level natural when we start learning things and realizing things. It's like we think we're helping the people that we love, but also nobody can be forced to change or see things, right? All you can do is kind of open a door and offer something and be like, if you want it, it's here. But anyway, so from about 2013 on, I start really kind of being way more conscious about what it is that I'm consuming, how it's impacting me, and the difference between certain foods and not foods and things like that. All of this to say, also, anybody who knew me between 2013 and like 2018 or 2019, I mean, also knows me as somebody who was like drinking a lot of alcohol, eating a lot of pizza. I went plant-based in 2016. So like I was eating like fried cheese curds. Like I was not like eating just kale and air, by any means, but it was part of my consciousness. And I knew the direction that I was moving, but I wasn't really ready to get there yet. And it was really in a kind of like COVID-y world that I started diving a lot more deeply into my own kind of cooking, my own kind of nourishment. And eventually that led me right to do the Whole30, which I mentioned in the trip episode before this. Episode 1, darling, I believe it was. because at that point I'd also been playing around with fasting, basically starting in 2019. I had started intermittent fasting, which I found to be incredibly, yeah, just again from a spiritual and like growth perspective, the sitting in the discomfort of your mind telling you that you need to eat something when you know you actually don't, and that you're just like, well, like, where is this coming from in me, this little voice that says you should eat, put food in your mouth right now, or put something in your mouth right now. Is that genuinely my body telling me I'm hungry? Or is that conditioning because I always eat breakfast at 9 a.m.? Or is it boredom or discomfort or distraction? Like, there's so many things. I will also say, when I started my intermittent fasting journey, like, this is where I'm hesitant to talk about a lot of this stuff with food and body and stuff, because the gray area between like unhealthy and healthy, for me, it was a very large gray area for years, right? Where it's like, I I firmly believe that experimenting with different styles of eating, be that the foods that you're consuming and when you're consuming them, how you're consuming them, the intention behind the consumption of them, abstaining from certain foods or food altogether, those are beautiful practices and incredibly necessary on at a certain point of a healing journey. They have to come into play if you're actually walking a path, and there will come a time where you've hit as far as you can go and grow without addressing the food and body component of it. And however that looks different for everyone, right? Again, I'm not saying that it has to come with fasting or come with whatever, but there will come a time where it's like, okay, we've got to look at the food stuff, we've got to look at the body stuff, and again, that will look different for everyone. um But the gray area for me, I mean, was that it was like this simultaneous thing of knowing that I was moving towards healthier and knowing that I was moving towards a more aligned, intuitive, grounded, healed, whole relationship with my body and with nourishing her. And I could only get there by really flirting with the line of all of the disordered chaos that had existed before. So, like, when I started intermittent fasting, there was part of me that was like, let's just see how long I can go without eating, and how much weight will I lose if I don't eat for this amount of time. And, like, loving the fact that my body looked a certain way if I didn't eat for a day or two. And also being very conscious of the fact that I'm like, this is a slippery slope. And I have been down that road before, and I'm not trying to go back there. And, just needing to have the faith and trust in myself of being like, where is the voice coming from? Like, if the thing that says don't eat today is coming from the consciousness level of me being like, okay, no, tune into your body, listen, like, sit with the discomfort of the voices that say, go get snacks, go get whatever. If it's coming from that, okay, proceed. If it's coming from, but think about how sexy you would be tomorrow if you just didn't eat. I don't know why I said that word. I never use that word in my own brain. But apparently that's the word that came out. But then it's like, okay, actually, no, we need to eat today, because I'm not going down that path of that voice being the one that wins. And I'm not saying I was perfect about it all the time at all, right? But like, and this is where I'm like, I'm not recommend. I am just sharing my experience, because I do believe that I don't know. I don't know where anyone else is on their path. And I would never, ever in a million years be like, you should try fasting if you've got a major history of disordered eating, right? Like, probably not a safe space for you to be tiptoeing into. And in order to grow and learn, a lot of the time we do have to dip into places that have been sources of pain and disorder for us, right? In the past. Um and again, one of the really fascinating things about food in particular for me is like, if you are an alcoholic or a drug addict or a gambling addict, fact, right? Like there is a world in which you can just literally never drink alcohol again. It's hard. I'm not like, oh my God, it's so easy. But you will survive for the rest of you. Actually, your body will thrive if you don't drink alcohol ever again. You can, if you never do heroin again or meth, like again, it's that you don't need those things. You can't overcome a warped or addictive relationship with food without actually having to use the thing that has been the addiction and the source of all of the problem. Well, not the source of all of the problem, the thing that you have created, like in your mind, have decided is the source of all of the problem, but you're trying to make it the solution. And also, it has nothing to do with that. But you're like, this is the place where I'm just going to act out all these crazy things. But yeah, it's not an option, right? Obviously, you need to eat. And so no matter what, there is this thing of being like, well, to heal this and to come to a healthy spot, you're going to kind of have to be dancing in the fire, right? Like no one would tell an alcoholic like, oh, well, just like keep drinking until you like, you can't even say, I'm like, I can't even think of how you would even, because it's not a thing, right? It's like, stop drinking. If you have a messed up relationship with food, not eating is not going to make it any better. And so no matter what, you are interacting with this thing that is also this giant source of all of this to say in March of 2021, it was the first time. So I'd been fasting for about a year and, coming to understand deeper layers of my own body and what it felt like and what it could feel like when I was, again, abstaining from certain things. At this point in my life too, I was still drinking. I was going through decent periods where I wasn't drinking, and I knew that that was my future. I had known my dad is a recovered alcoholic. He got sober when I was 17 years old, thankfully. And honestly, his journey in sobriety has been so, this is a separate thing altogether, but like was some of my first tastes of what kind of a spiritual path, healing path even looks like without knowing it, right? Like he gave me a lot of terminology and a lot of ideas when I was a late teenager that I now recognize as being like, oh yeah, that planted a lot of seeds. But anyway, I knew as a teenager that there would be a future in which eventually I did not drink. I knew it was going to take a while to get there. I had no, like, I didn't feel like it was going to be a like, oh, well, there's a day that I have to stop drinking, right? Like I was, yeah, but it was just like, no, I know that this will not serve me for my entire life. And I don't want to go. I was viscerally aware of the fact that it's like a lot of, like alcoholism runs in families, right? It's like, I don't need to go down that road. It's like, I can live in this world and also just, there's a lot of stuff that as a young person I also was just intuitively aware of my own future and my own timeline, and alcohol was one of those things. And the eventual lack of it in my life was one of those things. But in my late 20s and early 30s, I was still drinking in certain aspects of my life. Like when I was traveling and alone, I wouldn't really drink, but then I would be back in Chicago or back in certain friend groups. And then all of a sudden it was like, you're out 5 nights a week. And it's like, this is just normal. And it's like, well, no. Why do I feel so disconnected from my heart and my soul and everything? I can't figure that out. I'm going to just keep drinking and maybe it'll go away. Yeah, but I was doing a lot of experiments in 2021 and with the 2020 into 2021. And that was one of the gifts of COVID, right? Where I kind of had the time and the space to be like, well, what happens if you do this or don't do that? I was making my own sauerkraut a lot. I know everyone else got on the sourdough bread thing, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a lot of sauerkraut with red cabbage and just let it ferment on my kitchen counter. It was really good. Very much recommend. Anyway, I did my first I did my first Whole30 March 2021. And if you're unfamiliar, basically it is an elimination diet that is meant to help. You spend 30 days eating just like the cleanest of food, basically. They include meat in it if you're somebody who eats meat. I do not. No dairy, You can do eggs if that's a thing that you do. They do allow ghee, so clarified butter is the only dairy source. Other than that, it's basically fruits, vegetables, nuts. Uh, the only oils and fats that are allowed are olive, avocado, coconut, maybe a little sesame, I think. Um, Tallow, again, if you consume that. Um, yeah, so basically no seed oils. And that's kind of it. There's no rice, no wheat, no gluten, obviously, no legumes, no sugar, no alcohol, no additives, no preservatives. So like it's, very much just like eating food as it is for 30 days. And then the idea is that you'll slowly reintroduce things on the other side to kind of see what makes, if your body has a reaction to anything. And I had first heard about the Whole30 just over a year before. When I had been in Guatemala, I met this man, who I'll talk about again. But we had like a 15-minute conversation, and it was just one of those conversations where he was like, boom, 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 I'm going to plant all of these seeds that will germinate in your brain, and you will not let go of them until they have come to fruition. I don't even remember his name. I would love to someday have our paths cross again. Yeah, because like, holy heck, he just was like, what about, here's all of these doors that I'll just open and then, okay, see ya. And I was like, great. But he had mentioned the Whole30 to me as basically something that had made him clearer and more centered in his own consciousness than like almost anything else he had experienced. He was like, after those 30 days, he was just because there was just no gunk in him, right? And it's funny, in a modern society, I feel like you see a lot of people who like poo poo like cleanses and things like that. And I think that obviously the diet industry and the cleanse industry, like there's a million and billion, billion, trillion numbers that don't even exist amounts of problems with that, right? And just like doing like a 3-day juice detox isn't going to fix all of your problems forever. That is not the case. But a lot of people will talk about how like the body has systems for detoxing itself, so you don't need to do the detox. And again, I'm not a medical expert, right? So like this is just my feeling on the matter. I completely believe that. Obviously, our bodies are beautiful things that do take care of us and like, yeah, clean a lot of the gunk out. Most modern diets and lifestyles overload the system so much that your organs don't have time to actually adequately clear it all out, like I'm the episode of I Love Lucy where they're at the chocolate factory and it's like everything's fine, but then as the speed goes faster, like they can't keep up, and then they're just like shoving chocolates everywhere and it's just mayhem. I feel like that's what a lot of our like body kind of is, right? And so yes, your liver and your kidneys, like they're incredible organs that do their job as best as they can. And if you're pouring in gallons of alcohol and sugar and seed oils and preservatives and then not moving at all, and like even the best liver in the whole dang world is going to struggle, right? And so giving your body a time and a moment and a period of reprieve, and then knowing what that feels like in you as well, because it's like, this is why experience in all things is so important. Because I could theorize what it's like to live in a body that didn't have any, processed food in it, but you don't actually know what that feels like until you have spent the amount of time to let all of that kind of clear out, to move it. And then honestly, and to one, experience that, but then also experience what it feels like to go back. And this is something that I've done a million times, is that it's like, prolonged period of like very clean, very healthy eating, maybe detoxing, maybe fasting, maybe whatever it is. And then it's like, ooh, I'm going to go back into my old ways. And boom, like the mental fog, the lethargy, the like, just like the difference, it's not even night and day, it's more than night and day. I don't even know what more than night and day is, but like really nighttime and really daytime, like Like the dark is dark and the light is light. Um, yeah, but you don't realize how clouded you are while you're still in the cloud. And so that's where, for me, something like a Whole 30, that first experience of it, and it's all, with the travel journey, with the life story, like everything is perfect. It is literally, it was perfectly written. I had no idea at the time, of course, but the fact that I happened to do that Whole 30, to spend that month, I actually ended up ending it on the 26th or 27th day because I got to Costa Rica right at the end of it. And I tried to keep it going for like a day. And then I was like, I don't care. I'm in Costa Rica and I'm going to eat what I want and do what I want. And that came from both a place of love of being like, I don't need to force myself to not eat food when I'm in a foreign country, and also came from a place of me being like, I'm gonna let the beast out and I can drink sangria if I want to. And it's like, okay, maybe you overdid it a little bit, but you're good. You're still learning. uh, but yeah, I mean, the fact that I got to Costa Rica that clear after almost 4 full weeks of just being so intentional about what I was consuming that my third eye and my crown were just completely cracked open. The fact that I then stepped off of that plane and stepped into this current that was going to sweep me away for the rest of my life. Like, those things are completely related and correlated. The fact that I had spent those days, and you'll hear a lot of people, when you talk about plant medicine, talking about dietas. Basically, like if you're going to sit with ayahuasca, spending, I mean, any shamans that are watching this are going to be like, I think it's 2 weeks, some amount of time before your ceremony, being very, very intentional and clear about what it is that you're consuming, as partially as kind of a sacrifice and offering to the plant medicine itself, being like, I am abstaining from these things, like in an act of service, and also to purify and cleanse the vessel. Dieta for ayahuasca is supposed to literally just be like basically like fruit and vegetables and like no salt. Like it's literally just like the purest of the pure, right? The medicine also works better if it doesn't have to, because the medicine will clear out any impurities that you have in you, including the McDonald's cheeseburger that you ate before your ceremony. So it's like, if you actually want the medicine to work, it's just better to do the dieta. But we'll get there. Yeah. And yeah, so like, all again, and I have learned this now so many times over the last few years too, as I have done intentional cleanses and periods of prolonged fasting and stuff, like going in with that kind of open heart, open energy, open intention, and the way that the universe then responds to that, and you kind of offering that sacrifice of like, I am foregoing these things that often have grips on me. How much time do you spend thinking about what's for dinner, what's for dinner, what's for dinner, when you could be thinking about anything else? Like, what's my heart's desire? How am I going to help save the world? Like, isn't that tree beautiful? Anything. Oh, look, just I'm human. Like, the things that rule us really rule us. And for some of us, myself included, food in my body were a major part of that. And I'm going to let that be the end of this today. I think I went all over the place, and that's okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if anyone's really out there watching or listening, but if you are, feel free to let me know if you can follow. As I'm bouncing all over the place. Um, yeah, and as always, thank you to everybody who is supporting this on Patreon. You too can be a supporter for $3 a month. And at higher tiers, you can read my journals from the time. So you can actually read me like being like, I'm gonna drink sangria because I don't care. I'm ruining my Whole 30. Yeah, she was a beautiful version, that version. And next time we will tell the story of that. And thanks for being here. You're doing great. I love you.